A little early. Well, actually, it's not early. It's 1 minute after, but earlier than usual. Somebody last time said, actually, last time I was talking about not giving up, and that we got nothing to lose. You just keep loving people, and you never know what the results will be. And somebody at the very end said, 4 years ago, you told me to do this with my brother, who had been estranged from me. And this person just kept loving their brother and loving their brother. And at the end of the webcast, this person said this past March he finally replied and sent me a very brief email saying, happy birthday. You never know. So, you know, here's 4 years of making little contacts, and this guy finally responds with, happy birthday. Who knew? It may take sometimes years and years of contacting somebody before the ice melts a little bit. But why not? What do you got better to do? So it's worth doing. You just keep at it, and you keep loving people, and you never really know kind of what miracles will happen. Here's a lady who said, I started attending a weekly Real Love Women's group last July and went fairly regularly until early this year. And I'll start going back to the group in a couple of weeks. Recently, I received 2 emails from the co-leaders of the group. The bottom line of the emails is that the only technique that I'm told that will be allowed in the group is what, why, what. I have some unloving thoughts and feelings about the emails about one of the group leaders and what I perceive as control that's being exerted over the group by this one co-leader and by the minister of the church where the group meets. One of the group members, who is a certified Real Love coach and no longer attends the group, called me and gave me the information that this co-leader had called her and told her not to talk about a certain matter. Later, another group member told me that the co-leader had actually called this coach 4 times in all to complain about her behavior in the group. The group member also talked to the minister and was told that she'd had at least a couple of complaints about the coach's behavior in the group, and that she, the minister, didn't necessarily agree with the way Greg Bear does Real Love, and that this is the way that they were going to do it at the church. This group member also told me that she'd talked to several other group members who said that as a result of the new rules that they're afraid to speak at all in the group. Recently, the nice co-leader called me to ask when I was returning to the group, and when I did, would I take a turn being the designated wise woman for 10 weeks. Apparently, they're going to rotate the wise woman or wise person. I feel like, I guess it's a women's group, so it would be wise woman. I feel like there's a giant elephant in the room with our group, and everyone's afraid to acknowledge it, let alone talk about it. Something's wrong with this picture, and I need help seeing this clearly. So, you know, what's going on here? You know, in the first place, no group anywhere is my group. So you get to do whatever you want to in your group. My suggestion is that, and it's just my suggestion, is that there are, and I get asked this a lot, what are the rules of running a group? And my suggestion is that there are no rules. None. 0 rules. If you read the group Real Love for Wise Men and Women, there are lists of guidelines that will help facilitate people telling the truth. But as soon as you make a rule, you can't do this or you must do that, what you're telling people is how they have to be in order to be acceptable. And isn't it the whole point that people get to come to a place where they don't have to be a certain way in order to be accepted and loved? Isn't that kind of like the whole point? Is that they can come to a place where they can be unconditionally accepted. When you make a rule, then you're placing conditions on their acceptance. That's the point. So I recommend to people that they don't have rules at all. None. I've seen people come into groups, for example, and curse and scream and use foul language, in which case what we say to them is, wow, you're pretty upset, so tell us some more about that. In which case, once they feel accepted and loved, they don't keep screaming and cursing. All they wanted to know was, well, are you going to accept me and love me while I'm cursing? Well, sure we will. Whereas if you tell them, well, we have a rule in this group that there's going to be no cursing. Well, what did you just accomplish? You just gave them yet another example of you're not acceptable. If somebody says something and you say, well, that's not what, they're being told once again they have to be a certain way in order to be accepted, and that just stinks. So if I were attending a group and somebody said, in our group we have to do the 5 W's, I'd say, okay. I'd say, all right. And then when somebody spoke, I would simply ignore the rule and give whoever was speaking what they really need. I would just address their needs and love them. So if somebody's being really rigid and hateful in a group as a wise person and not doing it in a loving way and following the rules and not giving them what they need, you don't need to correct the person and say, oh, well, that's not very loving. You don't need to correct them. Just do it the right way. And so just as they're telling you what they're going to do, you also have a right in the group to do it the way you want to do. So love them and teach them correctly in that group. And if they choose to throw you out of the group because you're loving them correctly, let them throw you out. But you can be however you want to in the group. If they choose to make it pretty clear that they're not genuinely a loving group and pitch you out on your ear, well, let them do it. So that's what I'd suggest. You just be an example of a loving human being and see what happens. But you don't need to correct them. If they ask you, you can tell them what I teach about that the 5 W's are just suggestions. They're not hard and fast rules. And if somebody says, well, Greg Bear doesn't do real love right, well, I don't care. It doesn't offend me. But don't fight him about it. I'm nobody. Let's see. I'm struggling because, this is a question from somebody here in the group, because while I'm trying to learn how to love my daughter unconditionally, I'm making a tremendous amount of mistakes. And then I'm always telling her that Mommy was wrong and that I'm learning to do things better. But I'm telling her this daily and sometimes several times a day. I know this does help her when I admit I'm wrong because she sees that I'm not perfect either, but I don't know if she's learning anything other than Mommy's always wrong, and I worry that she won't believe that I'm trying to do better if all she hears is that Mommy made another mistake. Even though I may be doing better, in some ways she only sees that I'm making more mistakes. I worry about her growing up feeling like her mom always made mistakes. Will she think I'm a bad parent? Will this harm her, even though it is the truth? I'm not sure I feel worthy of the position of being a parent right now. My parents did things all wrong, and I've been so programmed to do things the wrong way that I find it difficult to reprogram myself. Any advice? Well, you're going to keep making mistakes, and you're being an example to your daughter of what it means to tell the truth and change your life. And, you know, we tell our kids to tell the truth and change the direction of their lives. How do we expect them to do that if we don't set an example for them? So how do we expect our kids to, for example, say, oh, yeah, I made a mistake and I'm going to do that differently, if we're not willing to do the same thing ourselves? So, yeah, she might say, yeah, Mom makes a lot of mistakes, but isn't that like the human condition? So good for you that you're willing to show her that, as opposed to everybody else in the world who is lying to everybody and pretending not to make mistakes. You know, I suppose you're worried about not looking as perfect as everybody else when really you're just not keeping up the lies like everybody else. One thing that might help you make fewer mistakes, I suppose, is if you open your mouth less and think more before you open your mouth, but you'll still make lots of mistakes. So what? Big deal. You get to make them. And it shows just enormous maturity and courage on your part that you're willing to say to her, hey, my bad. Can you imagine if our parents had had the guts to do that with us? And can you imagine what it's going to be like for your daughter as she grows older to be able to, just with a toss of her head or the wave of her hand as she gets older, to go, I made a mistake. Imagine how her life is going to be different because you showed her how easy that is instead of how painful or how rare. So, no, I don't think you're hurting her. Or you can go back to lying to her about your mistakes. Look at the alternative. Nah, you're not killing her. Back to the question about the person who was talking about how to do groups. We're going to be talking more about how to run groups in Phoenix. We're going to be meeting in Phoenix May 17 and 18, so take advantage of that opportunity because we're going to be showing examples of working with couples and in groups there. So we'll see you in Phoenix there. Go online and you can sign up for the seminar 17th and 18th of this month. Now you get to make lots and lots of mistakes with your kids. The trick is admitting them and changing them, not really so much avoiding them. And you talk about not being worthy of being a mother. Yeah, well, you know, who is? If we waited to be worthy before we did anything with our kids, well, nobody'd ever have children. Here's somebody who wrote, I'm believing a lie and I'm jealous. Yesterday I drove to another state in order to pick up I've never heard this term, but it makes perfect sense, the cremains, obviously the cremated remains of my friend who passed away last year. I met with her husband and we had lunch. During this brief visit, he told me that he started dating a woman in October, which would have been 2 months after she died. They moved in together in March, and they're getting married in June. And he's very happy because she's so much fun. This will be his third marriage. And her question is, why do some people find 3 spouses and I can't even find one? Feeling sorry for myself. Well, I don't know the answer to that there, sweetie. I don't know why you can't find one. But comparing ourselves to other people is just utter destruction. For one thing, we have no clue whether these other people who appear to be happy really are. I get to spend time on the phone with these people who appear to be really, really happy, and they're just miserable. I've met now with many people who've had 4, 5, and 6 spouses, and of course, in this example, he lost his last spouse because she died, but many of them have had 4, 5, and 6 exactly because they have not been happy with them. I tell you, I'd way rather be happy without a spouse than be married unhappily. I can tell you that from personal experience. So, knowing you personally myself, I I personally enjoy being with you, and all we can do is be in the company of people who unconditionally accept us and enjoy that. Whether we find an exclusive partner in our lifetimes, that's a nice bonus. It really is. That is fun to find. But to hurry up the process and rush into a relationship with an exclusive partner who doesn't understand unconditional love, what a disaster. Whether we'll find one in this life, boy, why some of us do and some of us don't, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not that smart. Here's somebody who wrote about her husband, which is kind of actually an interesting add-on to the last question, to the person who asked, why can I not find a partner? Here's a woman who did find her exclusive partner and has been living with him for the last, 40 years. And she's talking about him and said, you know my partner, he really is oblivious to me. Today I watched in utter speechlessness as he just simply ignored me. He walked out of the room twice while I was in the middle of a sentence, and on one of those occasions walked completely out of the house. He did let me know that he'd left something in the car before leaving, but it was like I wasn't even speaking. After doing this, he sat beside me on the sofa and called me by some ridiculous made-up name that sounded like it belonged to a jungle animal and said, okay, now, what were you saying? By then, the wind was gone out of my sail, and I told him something to that effect. But I wasn't angry. The moments were just gone. And he was on his way to church, of all things, and he topped off all of that attention with one more dose, in case I hadn't noticed earlier, by cutting me off in the middle of yet another sentence. That time I did feel anger, but not for long, thank goodness. I immediately made a call to a wise woman who did more talking than me. No kidding, bless her heart. She was just loving me. What a test. But I learned something. With my husband, I was able to see that I'm finally healing nicely. It still hurts some, but not so bad and not so quickly, and it's gone. With my sweetheart of a wise woman, I was reminded of the importance of listening. This is a woman who's been struggling with her 40-year marriage, or whatever it is, it's close to that, for a long, long time. And I've known her for years, and she used to go absolutely ballistic when he used to do this with her. And by making hundreds of calls, slowly, bit by bit, the wounds in her life have healed one by one, to the point that now when he comes into the room and stabs her and turns the knife, she doesn't go crazy. And she's just one of hundreds of examples of what it's like when you get repeatedly wounded by one person. You don't go to that person to get your wounds healed. You go and tell the truth about yourself to other people and get healed, so that when that person stabs you, it doesn't bother you anymore. She's a nice example of that. There have been times when she wondered if that would ever make a difference. My 16-year-old, who lives with us 3 weekends out of the month, we're getting toward the end of our questions, so if you've got some, let me know. My 16-year-old, who lives with us 3 weekends out of the month, is quite messy. He'll leave the kitchen cabinet doors open, dishes in his room, and on the countertop in the kitchen, skateboard by the front door in the living room, his room a mess, all that stuff. Kind of like what 16-year-olds do. When I see him, I ask him to pick up the dishes and put them in the sink and stuff like that, and he's pretty good about doing that. On Sunday nights, before taking him home, I try and go around and have him do a quick cleanup. We'll call him Steve, the kid. My husband, Fred, who has never had teenagers, she's remarried. she had this kid with the husband she's divorced. My husband, Fred, who has never had teenagers, hates the mess that my son makes. Just today, when he went downstairs and he saw the mess that Steve had made, he told me that I needed to teach Steve how to clean up his messes because he's not a child anymore. You can see this picture, right? So here we got the stepdad, and in comes this kid, 3 times a month that makes a mess, and the stepdad resents it that this kid does this. Understandable. So unless I follow Steve around like a puppy and demand that he clean up his mess as soon as he makes it, I don't know what else to do. It doesn't bother me because, 1, Steve is the last child out of 4, so I've done this before. 2, before he leaves, we do go around picking stuff up. 3, my sweet husband also leaves stuff laying around all the time and does not always clean it up right away. Neither do I, for that matter. So, a little hypocrisy on the part of the husband, Fred. 4, I realize that at most I have is 1 more year of my son coming over to the house before his job and friends completely take over his life based on what, my other kids have done. So, how do I handle this? How do I love my husband and my son the best? And it makes it look like you're stuck between these 2 guys, right? Because we got the one kid, the 16-year-old, who's a messy pig, and we got the husband who's saying, would you please take care of that filthy pig when he comes over to the house? And it makes it look like you're stuck. You're not stuck. And you're not stuck between them. All you do is love and teach both of them. So, you stay out of the conflict between these 2. And you treat them both like grown-ups. So you say to your husband, you say, I'm going to do the best I can with this kid. And I recommend that you stay out of the conflict. Because this kid comes over, 3 times a month. And he's at the tail end of disappearing. So, if this were a kid who were 12 and living with you full time, then, this would be a place to teach a kid with consequences. It would. And, there would be the tendency to pull out the parenting book and say, okay, now we're going to love and teach this kid, and we're going to teach a kid with consequences. But you have to be flexible. Every kid isn't the same. This kid appears more like a guest periodically. I realize he's a child. He's your kid. But he's more like a visitor than anything else. He really is. If your in-laws came over once a month, would you apply consequences to your in-laws? Good luck. You wouldn't recover from that soon. So he's kind of a cross between a child and in-laws. So you do have a right to ask him to clean up, which you probably wouldn't do with your in-laws, but apply consequences to him. This is a kid who's been pretty beaten up with a divorce or 2. Lighten up. So you might say to your husband, let's take it easy with this kid. Let's do more loving than teaching. And if you want to help me love the kid, great, but pounding on him isn't going to help. And, second item, are you willing to just love and accept me while I handle it? Because I'm going to do it imperfectly. Love him and love me. And deal with the fact that 3 times a month, there's going to be some inconvenience. It's just part of the mess. It's kind of like dealing with the mess of having a dog in the house. Are you willing to live with that? It's the price of doing business. It's the price of having the kid over. Are you willing to support me in that? That's what it looks like. As opposed to the way we tend to look at it is we want to have the kid over and have a clean house, which is not possible. We want to have the kid over with no inconvenience. Not going to happen. Now, the kid. When the kid comes over, you say, Steve, I love having you over. That's my number 1 message. Now, while you're here, any effort that you could make, because when you make a mess, it causes me a lot of extra work. Any effort that you can make to make my life easier and pick things up while you're here would be greatly appreciated. That's 3 sentences and takes less than 20 seconds. Done. No irritation, no you've made a mess in the past, no guilt, nope, just really appreciate it if you do that, make things easier for me. No, you need to be a more responsible human being. You're way too late for that. He's 16, you're dead. Follow? Just, hey, really be grateful. Done. And then you deal with it as it comes up. And if you end up having to clean up after him some, then there you go. Because this is not your typical child situation. Just isn't. You mean that old question?
The one I just put in.
Oh. The OSHA one. Where is it?
Is it not there with the...
Hi, not being a good mom, you mean? Okay. Let's see. Not being a good mom. I'm being controlling. This is from a young mother. I'm not being a good mom. I'm being controlling and terrible. And I'm blaming my mistakes on everybody else. Well, how terrible of you. Welcome to motherhood. We only control our kids when we become fearful ourselves. And we blame our mistakes on everybody else for the same reason. So when we make our mistakes and we fear that we will look awful, then only naturally we blame them on everybody else. So what's the solution? Tell the truth, and tell the truth. So earlier we had a mother who said, gee, I'm really afraid of looking like an awful mother. So the solution to that is what? You say, I'm an awful mother. We spend our whole lives going, I'm afraid that people will see that I'm an awful mother. Solution? Admit that you are. You were raised by parents who didn't know how to raise you. And so they raised you up to be an incompetent parent. You see that? I'm an incompetent parent. Practice it in the mirror. Then get on the conference calls and say to people, I'm really lousy at this. But you do it without the shaming. You don't go, oh, I'm really afraid that I'm a lousy parent. No, you just say, I'm really lousy at this. Just in the same way that you would say, I don't know how to play the piano, if you don't. You're not ashamed of it. You were just never given piano lessons. Well, you were never given parenting lessons either. Actually, you were given parenting lessons. You were given lessons in how to be a crappy parent. And it turns out that you did very well at crappy parenting lessons, as most of us did. We took the lessons and we caught on very well. We did it poorly, just like our parents did before us. So rather than feel terrible about it, which we do, we just have to sort of just smile and buck up and go, so I learned to do it all wrong. Now, let me tell you that I learned to do it all wrong. Feel accepted by people who can smile with us and laugh at us. I mean, look at all the people here. Read above, and you'll see all the people that made comments as somebody first said, I've been a lousy parent, and read all the comments of people who said, I'm a member of the Lousy Parent Club. They're all over the place. How many of us have screwed up our kids? And quit feeling like somehow you're some sort of special exception to parenthood. Then you won't hide it. You won't try to control your child so that your child won't make mistakes and reveal the fact that you are a lousy parent. You just are. Then there won't be this hiding and controlling. There's nothing to control anymore. Then you can just go, yep, there's more evidence that I'm a lousy parent. and you'll lose the shame of the thing. It's the shame and the hiding that are killing you, not the fact that you're doing a lousy job. Everybody already knows that. So did I. So do I still. Then you start practicing doing it right. And even when you know how to do it right, even when you know, you'll still do it wrong more than you do it right. Because simply knowing how to do it right in your head doesn't suddenly make you able to do it right. Does that make sense? Simply watching a video on ice skating, just because you can see how to do it, doesn't confer on you the ability to do it. So it's going to take you a whale of a lot of practice before you can change the wrong way to the right way. Dan says, I have much trouble traveling. And just feel like I'm going to die if I don't get home around familiar things. I feel almost like I'm in an unreal world and feel extremely anxious, and everything seems dark and negative. Is this due to a lack of real love? I also feel guilty, and as I am religious, I feel condemned by God and just want to run away and hide. Very weird, huh? No, not really. I think I just shut down inside and try to control myself and keep from thinking bad thoughts. If people don't feel sufficiently loved, it shows up in lots of ways. So, if you don't feel sufficiently loved, one of the ways that we fill our lives with imitation love is with safety. So what you just described is safety. If you get away from home, you feel unsafe. So you have to be back home in familiar surroundings. Make sense? The more unconditionally loved you feel by people, the more filled up with unconditional love, you're going to feel like you can travel anywhere and go anywhere. I've heard this story before. So, no, this is not unusual. And the more unloved you feel, the more condemned by God and everybody else you feel. So, no, actually, this makes lots of sense. And the only way for you to find out that this is true is to get more love in your life. If you have felt condemned by human beings all your life, and for most of us, God becomes an extension of the people we know. If every person in our life has been unloving, and the people that we know tell us that all that we know of love from the time that we're little kids is what we've received from people. So that's what we know love to be. And then we're taught God is love. So God is just a bigger version of the love that we've seen from people. Well then, guess who you'd feel condemned by? You'd feel condemned by God, who's a bigger version of the love that you've always received from people. Well, of course you'd feel condemned by God. As we feel more unconditional love from people, it's only natural, and I've only seen this, let's see, how many 100 times in my life. As you feel connected to the unconditional love that you receive from people, you will feel a natural increase in the connection that you feel to the love that's available to you, the infinite source of love from God. And lots of things in your life start to change after that. So I can explain that to you forever, but you'll know what I'm talking about as you start to feel it. That's the only way you'll know. And if you have more questions about that, even while we're talking here, let me know. Let me do a email question before I go back to a live one. I've been involved with real love for only a short time, but I jumped into the principles and understand them, but I'm really hurting now because of being empty and afraid. For 58 years, I've been searching for that special woman who'd give me the love that I so longed for. Well, it turned out to be imitation love. I felt very loved by my mother who raised me, but because of emptiness and fear, that must have been imitation love, because then naturally the woman that I found gave me nothing but imitation love. Well, I finally found a woman that I totally fell in love with. We were together for a year in a committed relationship that I hoped would lead to marriage. We broke up in February, and I've been miserable since. In reading Real Love, I realized that my love for her was about 90% conditional. Good call, because that's really common in relationships. That it's not all conditional, but usually mostly. Tons of unconscious getting and protecting behaviors. Since I had never found a source of imitation love like this, and then I finally got it in spades, the loss was devastating. It's hard for me to imagine finding a woman who will love me unconditionally. But worse, it's hard for me to imagine me not having a desire for that imitation love and being able to let go of my getting and protecting behaviors. Right now, I just want the pain to go away. I got on a conference call every night for a week after Atlanta, that's the seminar we just had, and have made some really good connections and friendships with fellow attendees. I've been listening to the Real Love and Dating CD, and I get this intellectually, but I'm still hurting and doubtful about my ability to transform. A good friend in Real Love said I was doing great and I just need to be where I am. Well, that still hurts. That's like having my hand on a hot burner and hurting, and he says, well, just be where you are. I get that. I want to do something to have the pain stop. I obsess about this woman about every 30 minutes and about us getting back together, and I know that won't work, but it still comes up. What can I do to feel less pain and to progress in Real Love? I'm also immobilized in my business out of pain, procrastination. I'm overwhelmed and fear. What can I do to get moving? I can't tell you enough how the use of imitation love becomes exactly, not just like, it is an addiction. Imitation love isn't like an addiction. The use of imitation love is an addiction. Exactly like cocaine. They're identical. You get to where you're falling in love with people. In fact, there was a study done at Harvard that showed that when people fall in love, it stimulates the same brain centers that are stimulated when you gamble in Las Vegas. That help you? It's that kind of excitement. It's addiction. So, this is hard to hear, but you're going through a literal addiction withdrawal. And I know it hurts. I know it hurts like crazy. I mean, when I went through withdrawal from narcotics, it made me nuts, which is why I went through it, hundreds and hundreds of times. I'd go through it and then go right back to using, and then go through it for a day and go back to using and go through it. So I get that it hurts. And there isn't an easier way except to go through it. Except, hang on, you'll find it much easier if you don't do it alone. And if you get on the phone, 5, 6, 10 times a day, and you talk to people and tell them how you're feeling. Don't do this alone. That list that you got after the Atlanta seminar, you call those people and tell them how you're feeling. I get this from people all the time. A lady called me just the other day. Her marriage was falling apart. She was miserable. She was in pain. She was on antidepressants. In fact, when she called, she says, I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know how I can take another step. That help you? That miserable. I just listened to her. I talked to her for, 10 minutes. I told her I understood what it feels like to be in that much pain. Now, I can never know exactly what it feels like to be you, but I know what it feels like to be in that much pain. And I listened to her. I understood her. I was able to say back to her what she was saying. I was able to even express some of the things that she was going through that she had not said to me, so that she understood that I really got what she was saying. And at the end of 10 minutes or so, she said, wow, I feel a lot better. I forget how much better it feels just to have somebody care about me. That's what you need to feel as many times as possible in a day. I can't tell you this enough, but we forget when we're in withdrawal, when we're in pain, how good that feels. And so what do? We suffer alone in agony, beating our heads against the wall, saying, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, and we don't do what will make us feel better. Or worse, we go back to using. And so we go find another woman. We go find some more drugs. We have sex. We do whatever. And now we're screwed. Because now we've got to keep using. And then we have to go through the withdrawal all over again. So make a phone call and get loved. No kidding. Let's see. You're cutting these off and putting the one at the top now for me. Is that what you're doing? Okay.
Are they getting cut off? Am I sending them again?
No, normally the entire, all the messages are all there for me, and now they're just getting cut off.
They're just chatting like crazy. I can resend them to you.
Well, the only one I have here, they're getting cut off. The Sue and Jeff one just vanished.
I have it again. There's a...
I don't have any now. I don't have any messages.
Okay, let me just send them to you.
If they're, you're going to have to send to me any.
I sent them all at once.
Well, just one then. All right. Karen says, how much detail does one go into when talking to a spouse about an emotional affair? I recognize that both partners have to be very full and that it is not said in a big deal way, more along the lines of, I've made a mistake. Partners tend to pull things from the past to beat over the head from years before, so hesitant to ever share this with him. Let me see here. I'm going to copy this. We're going to have to learn something different. Just a sec. They're just scrolling right off the top. Interesting. Okay. Okay. How much detail does one go into when talking to a spouse about an emotional affair? I recognize both partners have to be full and that it is not said in a big deal way, more along the lines of, I made a mistake. Partner tends to pull things, I see. My partner tends to pull things from the past to beat me over the head from years before, so I'm hesitant to share this with him. I've been advised to be seen and talk about this a lot, but I need your thoughts. I think the details are irrelevant, but would like your insight on this. I have in my notes from a victimhood seminar that we become chained to a person. We feel hurt. This is another person? Oh, it's very confusing. Oh, I just need to be sent one at a time. It's very confusing. All right, so when you're sharing, when you're talking to a partner about an emotional affair, then what you need to do is tell the person as much as they want to hear. So you need to tell them as much truth as it takes to get it over with. So if you're telling them, for example, in the past, I was emotionally close to a person, I was unfaithful to you, then you just describe, you say, and you describe it initially just vaguely, and you say, I was emotionally close to that person, I was emotionally unfaithful to you, I made phone calls and emails, and I was wrong to do that. And you just leave it at that. You're done. And you see if that's enough. And if it's enough, you're finished. And if the person says, well, did you make a lot of phone calls and emails? Yeah, I made lots. Exaggerate it. I did it a lot over a period of a year, and make it as, you don't exaggerate it as in make it more than it was, but you maximize it to its greatest extent. I did it for years. If it was 2 years, you say for years. If you did it, for example, 20 times, you say, I did it a lot, many times, rather than go, well, it was 19 times. The number isn't important. I did it many, many times, rather than say, well, it was only a few. If it was 19, you don't say a few, you say many times. You make yourself, you always tell the truth and maximize it. Because then you're done. You've told the truth, so that you can be seen, accepted, and loved for as bad as it was, rather than try to minimize it and then go back later and go, well, I didn't quite really tell you the truth, because that's just a terrible way to do it. Okay. All right, let's do this next one. I have in my notes from your victimhood seminar that we become chained to a person that we feel hurt us. And when we become angry, the other person basically owns us. My anger has impacted my health, but it seems to serve me in staying away from him. This man compulsively lies and manipulates, not caring about other people. I know I need to let go of resentments and anger and be loving, but I get drawn back to him when I do not keep it fresh in my mind how he didn't love me. How can I get past this anger and resentment while remembering this person has made no effort to be loving to me? I'm attempting to move forward in my life, but I still feel chained to this person. Easy. It's really easy to identify a person as being unloving and as somebody you don't want to be around without being angry at them. So this is somebody in your life who has been hateful and angry and miserable, and so you just say to yourself, I want to surround myself with as many loving, caring, supportive, nourishing people as possible, right? Yes. Is he one of those loving, nourishing, caring people? No. Let's see then. He wouldn't qualify as one of those stable of people, would he? As in stable of horses. I recommend to people who are trying to nourish themselves with real love that they actually identify a stable of unconditionally loving people that they choose to be around. That people that they choose to nourish, people that they choose to be nourished by, and that until they become healthy enough, that they limit the people that they're around. If he's not one of those people, you just say, he's not one of the, club, I suppose. Now, once you become healthier, you can allow yourself to be around anybody because they can't hurt you. But until you're healthy enough, you are not healthy enough to be around him. And so that's the trick, if you want a trick, is that you identify yourself as the problem. You say, I'm not healthy enough to be around him. Because that's the truth. He's an angry, hurtful person. And when you're around him, you are injured. But you don't need to be angry at him to identify that you're not healthy enough, do you? You're like, if you will, a tender plant. Well, you wouldn't take, surely you know enough about horticulture that you wouldn't take a young, tender plant and stick it out in an environment where it could, for example, be wilted in the sun or blown over by the wind. When it's young and tender enough, you'd keep it in the greenhouse. Well, you wouldn't do that with anger. You wouldn't say, I'm going to be mad at the wind. I'm going to be mad at the sun, that it would affect a young, tender plant. No, you would just wisely keep it in the greenhouse. Same thing with this person that you're talking about. The problem is the young, tender plant. It's not the sun and the wind. Same with you. I was talking with here's one. I have a neighbor who brings his dog to the grassy area outside of my condo. There is no dog walking next to the buildings, but he does it anyway. I've been really annoyed because it's disconcerting to be cooking dinner and looking out the kitchen window to see his dog doing his business. Yuck. He does this because it's more convenient to take his dog here rather than the dog walking area. Then it dawned on me yesterday how often I do things that are convenient to me and maybe not so legal, like exceeding the speed limit. I know I'm not loving enough to go and speak to him right now. I'd like to get to the point where I don't care about the dog. So that may be the secret to you, and that is, if you can't do a thing lovingly, then don't do it. So that would be, I suppose, my inclination. If I can't speak to somebody lovingly, then don't speak at all. So you practice. You talk to people about it on conference calls. When you get to the point where you can talk about this in a loving way to people on a conference call, then you practice with them, you practice with them, you practice actually the words that you're going to say to this guy. And then when you get the words down to where you can say it to them in a loving way, when you see him out there with his dog, you go out there and you say to him, with whatever words you practiced, I'd be really grateful if you could use the walking area instead of my lawn. You might even, for example, practice going out there with a paper towel and say, and I would appreciate it if you would pick up your dog's business now. You might even then practice with your group what you'll say if he doesn't do anything. For example, you might know what his address is and phone number is, and know what the phone number is of the local homeowners association, know what your recourse is, and so on. You need to practice what you're going to do in the event of whatever it is that he's going to say to you in response, so that you don't empty out and say something unkind. But if there's any possibility that you'll empty out and become angry, is it worth it? Because speaking to somebody about their dog, it's the same thing as with any other situation in our lives. It's not worth being angry. Just recently, it was suggested that I write down all the things that I have faith in and then go on to do the same for all the things that I do not have faith in. It turned out to be an interesting exercise, as what emerged was that I had conflicting or rather contradictory messages come through. I discovered that it was as if the part of me deep within who has a passion for growth experience and being amongst others that had faith, that everything was possible, and that there is always a way through to achieve my desires, to reach and be there to love and support others or anything I wanted to do. The other part of me lacks faith in many things, has doubts that I could do the things I want to do, all past conditioning. I believe the lie that I'm not good enough and not perfect enough to love others or many things in life. This is the fear talking, and I'm using it to hide behind. This is rubbish. I understand, and yet I continue to believe in a lie. This side of me hangs on, and I realize that it is purely a choice. These Jekyll and Hyde parts of me both keep coming up, and the fear-based, lacking faith part of often overwhelms and keeps me stuck. I guess I need to keep making the better choice of trying to break through my fear with faith and trust. Everything we do really is based on faith, isn't it? Everything. And it's a good thing to write down the things that we have faith in and don't have faith in. We really demonstrate what we have faith in by what we do, not by what we talk about. So if we, for example, don't make phone calls to people on a regular basis, what we're demonstrating is that we don't have faith that we can be loved. If we continue to try to parent our child by ourselves and don't make phone calls to people, we're demonstrating that we have faith that we can do it on our own, and we're having faith in the fact that the way our parents raised us is going to somehow improve and turn out better children than we turned out. And that's not going to work. So it really is all about faith, and we demonstrate our faith by the way that we behave, not by how we talk. I got a wonderful email from somebody who I asked about how he changed his victimhood, and this guy was just a world-class victim. And I said, so what turned your life around? And he said, conference calls. That's where I first experienced a fragile seed of faith. The people on the calls responded positively when I would say my name, and I thought just maybe some of them may like me. So I think I'll come back. That's when I began making every call. And he described in vivid detail how his life changed when he consistently started attending conference calls. From there, I became friends with a few of the other We Make Every Call Club. That led to more calls, and then individual calls. And then he went to the seminar in Atlanta, because so many of my conference call friends were going to be there. The thing that puzzled me is how excited they were when they heard that I was coming. Now, since the weekend, I've had so many people tell me how much they loved meeting me in person and how I was one of the highlights of their weekend. I just can't tell you. It's so repetitive. But no matter how much we study real love, what really changes our lives is where we feel loved by just regular, ordinary people. So keep making the calls, the conference calls, the individual calls, and then if possible, attend the actual seminars where you can meet these people and feel loved by them one-on-one, face-to-face. So I look forward to seeing you in a week where we'll do another webcast, attend the conference calls, and we'll see you in Phoenix in a couple weeks. So till then, we love you. We'll see you then.